Hello, here I am at part 2 of this Picot Hem. You see at the bottom that the stitches are actually, I can see, I don't know if it's clear on the video, the stitches are tighter. The stitches are narrower, the stitches are tighter. Having a tighter hem will help. And here's where we left off just after we did this. I had made a mistake and missed one of the yarn overs and went back and fixed it. Now when we fold on this line, and as you see the knitting readily folds on this row of yarn over picots, what we have are small little picots, small little points of knitting in the hem, and that's why this is called a Picot hem, because the space that the yarn over created the whole folds. Now the yarn is here in the first stitch on the let's put this away, because this is a tail and I don't want to accidentally knit the tail. I'm actually going to tuck it inside the hem. Here's the yarn in the first stitch on the needle. The knitting has been folded. The stitches that were provisional, part of the Judy's Magic Cast On provisional, are here at the tip of the needle with the blue needle, which was the smaller size. I'm going to take the needle that I want to knit with, and almost as if I were doing a 3 needle bind off, I'm going to put the needle into both stitches, the front stitch and the back stitch, pull it through, let them both slip off, and again repeat, into the front, into the back. The two are knit together, the yarn is pulled through. Now in a 3 needle bind off we would actually begin to bind off, but when we're doing a hem we're not going to bind off, we're just going to continue knitting the 2 stitches together, one from the front, one from the back, pull the stitch through, one from the front, one from the back, pull the stitch through, and continue. And this way your hem is created and knit in place and requires no further finishing except for blocking. And blocking is an important part with a hem, but because we have used the Judy's Magic Cast On as a provisional, and both sides of our cast on had the same number of stitches, we only worked one side. We now have the same number of stitches cast on as we have in the main body of our work, and I happen to cast on 21 because an odd number is required for this cast on to work best. And now I'm just binding off. You don't want to be too tight when you're binding off. You don't want to be too loose. You just want to try and keep an even tension so that you have an even tension in your hem. And as I say, this is a rather short hem for demonstration purposes. At 1 inch, it's probably the minimum size you'd want for worsted weight yarn. I would probably even want to go to maybe 1.5 inches, a couple more rows. And here we are, working the last 2 stitches. There we go. And now the last stitch. Now I sometimes find that can be difficult to do the last stitch, and what I do is just put them together on the needle to knit them together. It's just a minor technique. We can now get rid of the smaller size needle. That will no longer be necessary. And now what I have is a bit of knitting with a Picot hem. You can barely see now, but you will be able to see if I do one more row. the depth of the hem. You'll actually see the hem slightly, and as you block, the hem will become less evident. As I say, prefer this method. An alternate method is to use a provisional cast on, work your hem, work the length, and instead of doing this sort of double needle, the 2-needle bind off or 3-needle bind off type method, is to just leave the stitches live until you have finished whatever, and then sew them down, grafting the hem with a sewn method. I find that requires a lot of yarn to be pulled through the different stitches as you're sewing them. I find it's hard to keep the line straight unless you have a stripe. I find it to be a pain in the butt. Okay, so clearly, I mean, it's clearly evident where the hem is joined. But as I say, once this is blocked, it is less evident. And because of this thing, you can see there's a tendency for the knitting to want to bend there, and that could cause the hem to fold up. So this is why you want to have a deeper hem. A deeper hem will have more weight to it, and the weight alone will keep the hem in place. Blocking will help keep the hem in place. Seaming will help keep the hem in place. There are a lot of things that will help keep the hem from flipping up. But making a picot hem is as simple as that. A couple of rows of stockinette, a turning row consisting of starting the row with a knit 1, then doing a yarn over knit 2 together, then continuing with your larger gauge needle till you have an equal length to your hem. You might not have the same row count because of the different gauge. In my case, I happen to have the same row count, even though you can clearly see the hem is pulled in. It pulls in away from the edge, and that's actually an advantage. You know, you can pull it out and stretch it slightly, but the slightly smaller hem makes the hem more stable. So there's how you do a picot hem in knitting.